So we'll start with Yvonne Gardner, who has a video that she'll share. And I'll pull that up now. Arnie, I really want to make you proud as the millennial up here, but or one of them.
Let me ask
Yeah. It's a YouTube.
Oh, there's a dot in YouTube.
Oh.
You just copy it and paste it and take the dot out.
You get to that. Paste the thing back.
Great. Yeah. Thanks.
Five words you pronounced wrong 2 years before you.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, sorry, that's hard for me to watch, but. So as you can see from the video, my son Parker, he's greatly missed by a large family, a large community that felt his loss from day one. He was a very vibrant young man, healthy. And to tell you a little bit about his background, he just newly been married and he snored. He snored like a freight train. Even when he was young, our bedroom was up above his and we could hear him from the basement. When he'd get home at night, we could hear him. And So after being married for a few months, he decided on his own that he was going to go in, and his doctor's advice was to have his tonsils out and his adenoids, to stretch his sinuses, see if maybe that would help his snoring. So the same day he went in with his wife, I took my 17-year-old daughter in to have her tonsils taken out. They were very inflamed and causing her a lot of pain. And so we kind of crossed paths at the hospital that day. My daughter was first. She went for the surgery with the same surgeon, had her tonsils out. We took her home, got her situated. We heard later from my daughter-in-law that that my son was home and that things went well. And I heard from him the next day. Things were fine. My daughter was still miserable on the couch, taking her medication as often as the doctor had prescribed it to her. And Saturday came, and my son and his wife came by, and this was December 3rd, dropped us off our kilo of Christmas presents. And just remember thinking, wow, they're on the ball. I haven't even thought about Christmas yet. It's been a busy season for me, and I hadn't even thought about Christmas, but they're already delivering their Christmas gift. They gave us a hug and told us they loved us, and then went on their way delivering the rest of their Christmas gifts. Went home that night and put up their first Christmas tree in their little apartment. And Parker, he had all of his Christmas gifts ready for his new wife, and he wrapped them and spent the evening there with her. The next morning, I was sitting at church with my family, and I got a call from my daughter-in-law, and she said, Parker's not breathing. And I'm like, that was just a weird thing. I'm like, well, did you call an ambulance? You see that ambulance is already here. You guys need to come here. They were only about a mile away from where we were at. And so I had left the meeting to answer the phone call, and I went in and got my family. It was a very cold December day. It was like 20 degrees outside, and we went to my son's house. And they, first of all, wouldn't let us in. They said it was a crime scene, that he had overdosed. I was very angry with the police officer. We live in a small community, and I knew that police officer. And I'm like, yeah, not this son. He wouldn't have overdosed. He was my child that he wouldn't even rarely take Tylenol or anything for a headache. He was the kind, he's like, no, Mom, I'm just gonna go lay down for a while. I'll be good. I'm just tired. So I knew that that wasn't the case from the get-go. So after standing out in the cold for a few hours, they finally relented and let us go inside. They'd already taken my son's body and put it in the body bag. But I insisted as his mother, I wanted at least to touch him and to still feel that somehow he was there. But come to find out later, we did send him in for an autopsy to find out what could have caused this. The law enforcement told us, and even some of the medical community just said, oh, this is just a weird firestorm of events, and sometimes these things happen. And how does that happen? That a 21-year-old perfectly healthy young man can go to sleep at night, lay next to his wife, and not wake up. She got up early that morning because she knew he wanted to sleep, being in pain, and she'd been up talking to him in the middle of the night, about 1 or 2 o'clock. He asked for another pain pill. His doctor had prescribed him Percocet, and they laid in bed and talked, and she got up early and then went back in there a couple hours later and found that he was unresponsive, not breathing. And so that's when she called 911, and my son's a big man. He's 6'5". He was about 230 pounds, and she was little, and she was trying to get him on the floor to give him CPR. And then when the EMTs arrived, they just said, no, there's some lividity there. It's too late. There's nothing we can do to help him. And that was about the time that we arrived. And so as a mom, I was surprised that how could I send my son in for just a routine tonsillectomy and not get him back. But it was because we didn't know of the dangers of the medicine that he was taking. I had no idea as a mom, of course, I tried to do some due diligence and I searched on the internet to find tonsillectomies and any kind of problems or things that could happen. And I really didn't find much. And it was after my son passed away, then I Googled tonsillectomy fatalities and a lot of things came up. But I still didn't have the reason that my son had died. I didn't know what had killed him and why he had died. We waited 6 months for the coroner to come back and tell us that he died of pneumonia. And his ENT said, no, he was perfectly healthy. Nothing was wrong with him when he came into my office. That was not the case. And when we started researching, he said that he believed it was respiratory depression brought on by the opioids. We were able to we had a good list. His wife had kept track of the prescriptions that he had been given the whole time since he had returned from the hospital. And even being such a big man, he had only taken half of his prescribed dose of the Percocet for the pain. And my little daughter, she was 130 pounds and she'd been taking the full dose and it didn't affect her as it did my son. So this is, looking at medical professionals, the ENT was my friend. He was our friend. I knew he wouldn't have done anything to purposely injure my son, which he didn't. The surgery was fine. Everything was fine. But it was just the prescription and it was that opioid. And myself as a mother, since that wasn't something that was familiar to us, we did not understand the complications and problems that could bring on. And so as part of my story, I just wanted to thank you guys for all that you're doing for patient safety. When I was looking for my son to find answers, I got such a wide response from our community because Parker was well known. And so I started getting all sorts of texts and messages and phone calls saying, well, didn't you know that this little 3-year-old died like this a few months ago? She had a tonsillectomy and she died. And I didn't know about that. And then I had a girlfriend I went to high school with, and she said, yeah, one of our truck drivers, he went in for tonsillectomy, he's 28, and his girlfriend went to check on him a couple days later and he was dead in bed at home. There was an older lady that was my neighbor, and she said, my daughter, she went in for tonsillectomy, and a couple days later she was laying on the couch and her daughter found her unresponsive, and they called an ambulance and she was able to be resuscitated and she survived. A young lady that I coached in basketball, she had contacted me on Facebook and she said, yeah, I had the same thing happen to me. My husband was he was setting his alarm and giving me my medicine every 4 hours. But with her second dose, after she came home from the hospital, he came in there and found her unresponsive, and she was taken to the hospital also, and she was revived. But a few months after, my doctor, he worked hard, and I can kind of understand some of your frustration. He was kind of ostracized by the physicians that he worked with after the death of my son, because he knew that there was something else that they could do as a medical community. So he started sending home monitors with his patients to monitor their oxygen levels. Because he says, we're keeping them on monitors when they're in the hospital. And then as soon as we release them, we send them home. We send them home with these painkillers, and they're not being monitored. And they're with people like family that aren't educated or aren't taught what type of signs to look for. So one of the little gals he sent home with a monitor, she was realizing, and her mom, that it was dropping to 70 on her pulse oximeter, but they still didn't understand what that meant. And her mom said she last saw her about 3:45 in the morning, and her oxygen monitor was dropping down to 70, but it wasn't an alarming one. And then her mom would just kind of shake her a little bit, say, take a deep breath, take a deep breath. And then they both fell asleep. And then at 4 o'clock, she woke up and her daughter was totally blue, flatlined, not breathing. And I met this young woman later. I didn't know her before this. She was able to tell us that when they were trying to revive her, her sister, thank goodness, knew CPR. So they started CPR on her immediately. And she said she could come back for a little bit, but she could not respond with the way the medication affected her. She could not make any kind of response. They were yelling at her, saying, you know, just blink your eye, finger, do anything so we know you're still there. She said she could hear them, but she could not respond. And they ended up giving her 7 doses of naloxone before she made it to the hospital to be able to keep her alive. So as far as Parker's story, this is something that was unknown to us and we didn't know it was an issue. And I know in the medical community, you've been more aware of it than we have, but I totally appreciate what you're doing for patient safety, little things that affect all of us. Because just with Parker alone, it's not just one patient that you lose. It affected numerous people in our community, his friends. A lot of them had major depression issues after that. He was, you know, he was a good leader for them, and his siblings struggled and had a hard time trying to understand how this could happen to their brother. But I just want to thank you guys for all that you're doing for patient safety. Thank you very much.